Mr. President.
Senator from Florida is recognized.
Mr. President, I rise today to ask unanimous consent to pass the Safe Kids Act. I want to thank and welcome my colleagues who have joined me in this effort as co-sponsors, Senators Lee, Blackburn, Banks, Sullivan, Ricketts, Lummis, Budd, Rounds, Kennedy, Moody, and Sheehy. This bill is real simple. It's about protecting the integrity of American citizenship. It's also about protecting children from exploitation and trafficking. And it's about closing a dangerous loophole that our foreign adversaries are using to undermine our national security right now. To be an American citizen is one of the greatest privileges in the world. It's a sacred covenant between an individual and our nation. It comes with rights, privileges, and immunities that people around the world would do anything to have. It also comes with the responsibility to protect and defend those liberties for future generations. Right now, our nation is vulnerable because foreign adversaries have found a backdoor around our immigration laws. Right now, citizens of foreign adversarial nations can have children born on American soil and as American citizens through surrogacy. They actually never have to come on into our country. Think about how insane this is. Under the current system, a foreign adversary could arrange a surrogacy contract to have a child born in America and be given all the privileges of being counted as one of us. Then they can take that child back to their home country and raise that child under the influence of a regime that hates America. It's getting all the perks of American citizenship without any responsibility. It's taking a future voter and raising them in a country that wants to destroy our way of life. We can't let that happen. Think about the Ayatollah in Iran. He could arrange a contract with an American surrogate. That child could get American citizenship at birth, be taken back to Iran, and be raised by a regime that chants death to America. And then years later, that child could come back to the United States as an American citizen. That is not some far-fetched science fiction scenario. It is exactly the kind of vulnerability our foreign adversaries look for. The Chinese Communist Party has already demonstrated that it will exploit every weakness in our laws and institutions to advance its interests. Recent reporting has exposed disturbing examples of wealthy Chinese nationals exploiting American surrogacy arrangements to father more than 100 children born in the United States. We should be asking, what happens to these children? Who raises them? What are they taught? What country are they taught to love? And what happens when they are old enough to return to the U.S.? Could they attend our universities? Could they serve in our military? Could they receive security clearances? Could they run for president? These are real questions and a real vulnerability we face if we don't act today. We should not be creating a pipeline through which foreign adversaries can exploit American citizenship, raise American citizens under hostile foreign influence, and potentially bring them back into our country as Americans. But this is more about national security. It's about our children. We've already seen the heartbreaking consequences when international surrogacy arrangements go wrong. I've seen it right here in my home state. A recent dispute in St. Augustine, Florida, it's hard to believe, involving a surrogate mother fighting for parental rights, demonstrates the devastating legal and emotional consequences when kids are treated like this. Kyla Simpson had triplets almost 2 years ago. Now she's fighting her way through court for custody of them because the Chinese national on the surrogacy contract didn't show up. Now, let me make sure I tell you how this bill works, what it does and doesn't do. It doesn't ban surrogacy. It doesn't ban IVF. It doesn't take away women's rights. It doesn't interfere with Americans who use surrogacy or IVF to build their families. These are all separate debates. This bill is very narrow. It's focused on commercial surrogacy arrangements involving our country's most dangerous foreign enemies. This is about preventing hostile foreign regimes from exploiting legal loopholes to obtain American-born children. My Safe Kids Act would do two simple things. It would invalidate commercial surrogacy contracts involving designated foreign adversaries, including China, Iran, Russia, and North Korea. Second, it would create a misdemeanor penalty for any broker who knowingly facilitates one of these prohibited arrangements. And the way surrogacy works, there are surrogacy groups that organize surrogacy contracts. I cannot imagine why any senator would oppose closing this loophole. Every senator in this chamber should be alarmed that this is currently possible under our laws. We should not wait for Communist China, Iran, Russia, or North Korea to further exploit the vulnerability before we close it. American citizenship cannot be bought. American children are not commodities. You do not have to be born here to be American, but you do have to love what we have built. And we should never allow our foreign adversaries to turn our laws into weapons against the American people. I urge my colleagues to support the Save Kids Act. As if in legislative session, and notwithstanding Rule 22, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on the Judiciary be discharged from further consideration of S. 3101 and the Senate proceed to immediate consideration. Further ask that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Mr. President, reserving the right to object.
Senator from Illinois.
Mr. President, I've been in the House and Senate for quite a while. I've written a lot of bills and amendments. I've read even more. I'm absolutely confounded by the language of this proposal, S3101, by my friend and colleague from Florida. There are so many issues bouncing around this proposal of a serious nature that we would be foolish to do this by a voice vote here immediately on the Senate. This deserves a real hearing, a real investigation, because it involves a lot of elements that affect many people personally, many families personally. We're talking about reproductive rights. We are talking about personal freedom. I don't have a medical license. Some of my colleagues like to practice medicine on the floor of the Senate. I tend to listen to the experts on the subject. But I want to put this in perspective, if I can, for a moment. At issue here is the issue of surrogacy. How do I explain that in a few words as a layman? It is basically a person who says, this may not be a fertilized fetus that I have been responsible for creating, but I'm willing to allow my body to have this fetus during the gestational period until its birth. So that's the surrogacy involved in it. Let's put this in perspective for a moment if we can. How many births, live births, are there in the United States each year? 3.6 million. First, let's go to in vitro fertilization, because that is part of this conversation too. How many in vitro fertilization births out of the 3.6 million births in this country? 100,000. 2.6% in 2023 were in vitro fertilization. Surrogacy. How many gestational surrogacy births in the United States each year? I'd ask the senator from Florida, he may know, but I'll tell him. It's somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000. It is a fraction of a percentage. Now, involved in this debate is the belief by some that we should allow no surrogacy. I'm not one of those people. Let me tell you a story of a family I know. Husband, father, mother decided they wanted to have a family. They went to great lengths through IVF so that she could become pregnant. It was a tragedy to them personally when they lost the baby late in the pregnancy. She was crushed. Her sister, who is a medical doctor, said, "It appears you have some problems with delivering a child. Let me suggest to you that if you go through IVF, I will be the surrogate mother and carry the baby for you and your husband." They agreed. She went forward with it. And wouldn't you know, shortly afterwards, the IVF worked for the original mother, and she became pregnant as well. So sisters were pregnant by the same father and mother in this situation. It was an act of kindness and courage on the part of her sister to help her out. If you saw them in the park today with their little boy and little girl, you wouldn't pick them out of a crowd. But through IVF and through surrogacy, they have the family that they dreamed of. I think that was the right thing to do. Legally and morally, the right thing to do. Surrogacy has its place. It is an exceptional procedure. It is certainly not one when there are 5,000 or 6,000 in a year in America. It is certainly not one that really can be argued as part of any large conspiracy. But there are actually, and we've had hearings in the Judiciary Committee, there are actually Republicans who believe, Listen to this. It sounds preposterous. They believe there is some effort in a nation like China to have babies born in the United States, then bring them back to China and prepare them to come back to the United States someday to undermine our government or something. We've had hearings on that. And when you ask them, what do you have to prove? How can you prove what you just said? They have no evidence, but it's a conspiracy theory. And it's part of the calculation behind this amendment. This bill is purportedly about protecting our national security from foreign adversaries and protecting children from exploitation and trafficking. If you want to introduce a bill to deal with trafficking or exploitation of children or others, count me in. But this bill goes so much further. The senator from Florida pointed out at one point to a horrifying story of more than 20 children birthed by surrogate mothers. In one case, they were found abused and neglected in a home outside Los Angeles. I'm not in favor of those abuses. I would join him in stopping human trafficking. But this bill would not stop child abuse or trafficking. It would not prevent espionage by foreign adversaries. This bill would do nothing to prevent the situation that I've just described in Los Angeles. Instead of targeting bad actors, this bill would restrict who can access or enter into surrogacy contracts based solely on the nationality of the parties involved. This bill is not only grounded in an objection to birthright citizenship, but in some sort of a weird, unusual national security theory that goes behind this. For the record, the Supreme Court has decided on birthright citizenship. And for the record, the 14th Amendment is as clear as can be. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. The Supreme Court did not take long to agree with that. And I think that's part of the objection that's behind this amendment, the objection to that Supreme Court decision. Instead of targeting bad actors, this bill would restrict who can access or enter into surrogacy contracts based solely on the nationality of the parties involved. This bill voids all surrogacy agreements between a surrogate parent who's inside the United States at the time of the birth and who is a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident, and a prospective parent who's a national or resident of certain countries. The bill criminalizes assisting with making or executing such a surrogacy agreement in any way. The bill's plan would impact all surrogacy agreements with nationals from Russia, China, Iran, or North Korea. It does not allow for consideration how long these parties have been in the United States or the nature of the surrogacy agreement. For example, it would prevent an Iranian asylum seeker and her spouse from starting a family. After the U.S. Supreme Court decision holding birthright citizenship as the law of the land, this bill reads like the latest MAGA conspiracy attempt to achieve what they were unable to achieve in the Supreme Court, ending birthright citizenship. And state lawmakers from Florida and Texas are using similar legislation to chip away at access to reproductive rights. There was a controversy, and you may remember it, as to whether or not in vitro fertilization was consistent with MAGA principles. They ultimately announced that it was, and IVF was fine, but that just shows you that they run into a number of cases already where the principles do not bear out the reality of life in America. Some are pushing to ban surrogacy altogether. The case I gave you is a good illustration in my mind of why we shouldn't do that. They argue that the surrogacy agreement amounts to slavery and violating the 13th Amendment, a preposterous argument. Voiding and criminalizing surrogacy agreements with nationals from certain countries looks like the first step in a broader, troubling plan to restrict access to surrogacy. Countless couples, families, and individuals facing fertility challenges rely on access to surrogacy and other reproductive services to have children. Most people seeking surrogacy arrangements in the United States are Americans. Some are foreign nationals who reside in the United States. Others are foreigners who are turning to surrogacy in the U.S. because of limited access in their home countries. I support thoughtful efforts to ensure that access to surrogacy in the U.S. is not exploited by those seeking to abuse our laws. This bill has been referred to the Judiciary Committee on which I serve, and I'm ranking member. I would be happy to work with the senator from Florida on the complex issues that he raises with the amendment. We won't agree on everything, but we certainly would agree when we talk about exploitation and human trafficking. This bill does nothing to address those two issues, which are a major concern for me as well as the sponsor. I hope we can work together to come up with something meaningful in the weeks ahead. And for that reason, I object.
Mr. President.
The objection is heard. The senator from Florida is recognized.
So, first off, I appreciate the comments from my colleague from Illinois. I look forward to working with him to try to solve this. But let's remember what this is about. This is not about IVF. My family, it's impacted, IVF has been a very positive experience for my family. It doesn't impact a surrogacy for an American citizen. Surrogacy has impacted my family and friends. So those are important opportunities for Americans to have children. What this bill says, though, is if you're a national from people that want to destroy our way of life, if you could be Xi in China, you could be Putin in Russia, you could be Kim Jong-un in North Korea, you could be the Ayatollah, you will not have the right to have a child in this country by surrogacy. I mean, they don't even have to show up in this country and they could have a child. Why would they do that when they could do it in their own country? It doesn't make any sense to me. So this is a problem, and we need to resolve it. It's been a problem in this country. It's been a problem in my home state, and I look forward to working with my colleague from Illinois to solve it. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield back.
Senator from Colorado is recognized.
Mr. President, June 27th was one of the worst days in recent Colorado history. As the Knowles Fire roared along the Colorado-Utah border, the rifle heel attack team put on their uniforms and rushed towards danger. While battling the blaze, one firefighter was badly injured and four others, Nick Hutcherson, Emily Barker, Sidney Watson, and Nathan Matthews, ultimately lost their lives. There's bravery, then there's wildland firefighting. The word hero gets used a lot. Nick, Emily, Sidney, and Nathan embodied that word. They came from across the country to Colorado to form a unit united by one common mission: protecting lives, protecting property, and the landscapes we all cherish. Their commitment to our public lands wasn't a hobby, it was their life's work. Together, they collectively spent decades fighting fires. And as dedicated as they were to their vocation, they were equally devoted to their friends and to their family, making this loss even more devastating. Our hearts break for these firefighters and their families who all love them. These families deserve answers, and we need to understand what went wrong so we can prevent future tragedies. That's why I'm calling on the Department of the Interior to conduct a swift and thorough investigation into what happened, including whether the administration's recent shifts to the Wildland Fire Service played any role in this event. This isn't about playing politics or gotcha, trying to find blame. With wildfires still raging across Colorado, we can't afford to wait months and months to learn lessons that could save lives right now. Colorado's firefighting community is close-knit. They're almost like an athletic team. The loss of one firefighter is felt by everyone. The loss of four is quite simply unimaginable. So we have to get to the bottom of what happened and do everything we can to make sure that we prevent a repeat tragedy. As we do that, we're also mourning the loss of Nicholas Dale of British Columbia. Nicholas was a helicopter pilot who was tragically killed while battling a fire near Ouray in southwest Colorado. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family as well. Last month, I traveled to the Snyder Fire command post, and there I met with some of Nick, Emily, Sydney, and Nate's fellow firefighters and heard some of their stories. It brought me back to my time as governor, standing with crews after a terrible tragedy. The heartbreak never gets easier. It only gets worse over time. And Colorado's wildfires keep getting worse too. In the 1990s, Colorado averaged 13 wildfires a year. By the 2020s, that number has climbed from 13 to 70 a year. And that's why I'm here today, because we have a responsibility, all of us, regardless of politics, to prevent wildfires, to protect our communities, and to help people recover from disasters. We know we're not going to stop every wildfire, but we also know that many of the worst wildfires could have been less destructive if we'd taken certain common sense steps sooner, both from a shorter and a longer term perspective. First, we need to treat climate change like the emergency it is, and that's a long-term horizon, but an important one. On a visit outside of Leadville earlier this year, one official told our office that the annual snowpack averaged 240 inches. That's 20 feet. The thinnest snowpack in that equal period, that last 100 years, and this is, again, these are data collected every March for 100 years. The smallest, thinnest snowpack was 182 inches, not 240, which was the average, but 182 inches, roughly 15 feet. 240 inches is 20 feet. This winter, it was about 60 inches. That's 5 feet. So the average was 20 feet. The all-time low in 100 years was 15 feet, and suddenly this year it's 5 feet. And this isn't an isolated incident. Colorado is facing its worst drought in 1,200 years, according to sediments from the Grand Canyon. And let me say that again because it's hard to believe. Colorado is facing its worst drought in 1,200 years. It means you'd have to go back to the 9th century to find drought conditions this bad in Colorado. Lake Mead and Lake Powell, two of our biggest reservoirs in the West, have now fallen to their lowest levels on record. If the water in Lake Powell falls just another 33 feet, we'll hit what they call the power pool, meaning that point where there won't be enough water to generate hydroelectric power. Not every wildfire is caused by climate change, but scientists widely agree that climate change is making the problem far worse. Heat, drought, a moisture-starved atmosphere all increase wildfire risk, and each of these factors can be connected back to climate change. Since joining the Senate, tackling wildfires and drought has been among my top priorities. That's why we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which included the largest climate investment in American history. We won $4 billion for the Colorado River Basin and $8 billion for Western water infrastructure. We brought senators from 7 states together to form the Colorado River Caucus, a bipartisan caucus, to build consensus on how to use our shared resources. And we've introduced legislation that would help manage our forests better as well. Overgrown woodlands are tinderboxes that let wildfires spread faster and farther. But too often, government bureaucracy blocks the projects that we most need in order to reduce that risk before disaster strikes. Together with Senators Alex Padilla, John Curtis, and Tim Sheehy, we introduced the bipartisan Fix Our Forests Act. The idea is simple: streamline forest management and speed up new technologies for wildfire prevention, detection, and response. Our bill has passed through committee, and it's waiting for a full vote on the Senate floor. It shouldn't take another tragedy for the Senate to act. We need to pass fix our forests now. Solving our drought and our wildfire challenges requires cooperation across every level of government. But recently, that cooperation has been strained. Last year, the Trump administration froze over $150 million in already obligated funding for 17 Colorado water and drought resiliency projects. At a time of unprecedented drought, that is quite simply unconscionable. We've refused to accept it, and we've pushed the administration to release that money. So far, we've gotten roughly 2/3 of the funds released. We will not stop pushing until Colorado communities get every dollar they're entitled to. Colorado is also home to one of the world's great scientific resources, the National Center for Atmospheric Research, which is in Boulder, Colorado. For years, NCAR has given weather, climate, and wildfire forecasts that firefighters and emergency managers rely on to fight disasters. We have stood up to the Trump administration's attacks on this vital institution, and we're going to keep fighting for NCAR and for science. And finally, solving our wildfire problem and responding to disasters requires all of us to work together. So I want to, for a moment, just speak directly to our president. Last summer, one of the largest wildfires in Colorado history tore through Rio Blanco County. President Trump should know this county well. I can't expect him to know every county, but this is a special county. They love him. They voted for overwhelmingly to support him in 2024. But there are now a lot less campaign signs there than there were in 2024. When Colorado filed a disaster declaration to help these same people rebuild and prevent future tragedies, the White House denied their request. These are people who did everything right their entire lives, only to lose it all in a natural disaster. They paid their taxes, believing that if the worst ever did happen, their government would be there for them. I think President Trump broke that promise. Disasters should never be political, but this administration has politicized them. And if you're a Republican living in a blue state, you better hope that disaster doesn't strike your community. Or if you live in a red state and our next president happens to be a Democrat, you better hope this new Democratic president doesn't stick to these new rules created by President Trump. The president has approved 80% of disaster requests from Republican governors, but only about 60% from Democratic governors. That's not normal. To my knowledge, that's never happened before at that scale. Under prior administrations, the approval rate was roughly the same no matter which way a state had voted. And that's the way it should be. That's the way it has to be in a democracy. Politics should never decide whether you can rebuild your house after a fire. The Aspen Acres fire in south central Colorado has already destroyed over 300 houses. Colorado is slowly getting that fire under control thanks to the brave firefighters who are working day and night addressing it. It is the 7th largest wildfire in state history, and we're grateful that FEMA has authorized fire management assistance grants for that fire, as well as for the Gold Mountain fire and the Willow fire. The Aspen Acres fire will likely require a major disaster declaration. If it does, we will push this administration with everything we have to make sure Colorado gets the resources it needs and deserves. We're also fighting to take politics out of disaster relief. Congress needs to pass our bipartisan Disaster Declaration Transparency Act. It gives Congress the power to review disaster relief denials driven, or at least apparently driven, by politics, because disaster relief should never be political. In the meantime, it's important that every single Coloradan do their part to help reduce wildfire risks. They've got to follow local restrictions, practice campfire safety, create defensible space around their properties. On a recent trip to Beulah, which was engulfed by the Aspen Acres fire, I saw.
Will Senator wrap his comments, please?
I got it. I saw firsthand the devastation that wildfires leave behind. Block after block, all that remained was heavy smoke and heartbreak, charred chimneys, and maybe a hearth here and there. Drought and wildfires aren't going away. Unless we act, they'll only become more frequent, more destructive, and more expensive. That's why we need to work together on common sense solutions that make every community safer. That's why we're fighting here. That's what we're fighting for here in Washington, and I hope my colleagues will join me in this effort. Mr. President, I yield back.
Under the previous order, the question occurs on the adoption of the resolution. Ask for the ayes and nays. Is there a sufficient second? It appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks, Mr. Armstrong, Ms. Baldwin. Moran, Paul, Moran, Marino, Johnson, Collins. I'll get the person in the back next. Who was it? Is that Daines? Daines, thank you. Daines, Murkowski, thank you. Okay, Crapo, Shaheen, no. Mr. Banks, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Blunt-Rochester, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Britt, Mr. Budd, Ms. Cantwell, Mrs. Capito, Mr. Cassidy, Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons, Mr. Cornyn, Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Curtis, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Gallego, Mrs. Gillibrand, Ms. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper, Ms. Hirono, Mr. Hoven, Mr. Husted, Mrs. Hyde-Smith, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice, Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley, Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Marino, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young, Senators voting in the affirmative: Armstrong, Barrasso, Budd, Capito, Cassidy, Collins, Cornyn, Cotton, Crapo, Curtis, Daines, Ernst, Hawley, Hoven, Husted, Hyde-Smith, Johnson, Lee, Lummis, Moran, Marino, Murkowski, Paul, Risch, Scott of Florida, Scott of South Carolina, Sheehy, Tuberville, and Wicker. Senators voting in the negative: Alsobrooks, Blunt Rochester, Booker, Cantwell, Cortez Masto, Durbin, Fetterman, Gallego, Gillibrand, Hassan, Hickenlooper, King, Murray, Ossoff, Reed, Rosen, Sanders, Schatz, Schiff, Shaheen, Smith, Van Hollen, Welch, Whitehouse, and Wyden. Mr. Haggerty, aye. Mr. Heinrich, no. Ms. Baldwin, aye. Ms. Baldwin, no. Mr. Kramer, aye. Mr. Schmidt, aye. Mr. McCormick, aye. Mr. Rounds, aye. Mr. Kane, no. Mr. Ricketts, aye. Mr. Kennedy, aye. Mr. Padilla, no. Ms. Hirono, no. Ms. Klobuchar, no. Mrs. Britt. Mrs. Britt, aye. Mr. Coons. Mr. Coons, no. Ms. Slotkin. Ms. Slotkin, no. Mr. Grassley. Mr. Grassley, aye. Mr. Lujan. Mr. Lujan, no. Mr. Thune. Mr. Thune, aye. Mr. Langford. Mr. Langford, aye. Mr. Merkley. Mr. Merkley, No. Mr. Banks. Mr. Banks. Aye. Mrs. Moody. Mrs. Moody. Aye. Mr. Marshall. Mr. Marshall. Aye. Mr. Kim. Mr. Kim. No. Ms. Warren. Ms. Warren. No. Ms. Graham. Ms. Graham. Aye. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett. No. Mr. Bozeman. Mr. Bozeman. Aye. Mr. Warner, no. Mr. Blumenthal, no. Mr. Justice, aye. Mr. Young, aye. Mr. Markey, no. Ms. Duckworth, no. Mr. Cruz, aye. Mrs. Fisher, aye. Mr. Kelly, no. Mr. Peters. Mr. Peters, no. Mr. Murphy. Mr. Murphy, no. Mr. Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan, aye. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Schumer, no. Mr. Warnock. Mr. Warnock, no.
The yeas are 50, the nays are 47. The resolution is agreed to. Under the previous order, the motion to reconsider is considered made and laid upon the table, and the Senate will resume legislative session.
Madam President,
Senator from Alaska.
Madam President, I move to proceed to calendar number 320, which is H.R. 6500.
The clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar 320, H.R. 6500, an act to extend duty-free treatment provided with respect to imports from certain countries in Africa and so forth and for other purposes.
Madam President, I have 4 requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders.
Duly noted.
Madam President, I've come to the floor today to congratulate my friend and a former colleague in the Alaska State Legislature. This is an individual that I have great respect for, and that is Senator Lyman Hoffman. Senator Hoffman is retiring after nearly 4 decades of service to Alaska. Few legislators leave behind a legacy that's measured not only by years of service, but by the generation of the lives that they have improved. Senator Hoffman, the all-time longest-serving member of the Alaska State Legislature, he's one of those rare public servants. Throughout his nearly 40 years in office, Lyman has dedicated himself to improving the lives of Alaskans, particularly those in our state's most remote and underserved communities, and he has truly made a difference for them. Everyone who has spent time in the capital city of Juneau knows exactly where the center of gravity has been. It's been with Lyman. And we have all come to appreciate and value his experience, his knowledge, and really the wisdom that the man has. And at first you wouldn't expect it. He comes across as a kind of a quiet guy, a gruff, deep voice, and it's true to say he is a man of not too many words, but he's also a man who knows just exactly the right thing to say and the right time to say it. There's been many a legislator who has found themselves in some pretty tense budget negotiations in the Senate Finance Committee. Senator Hoffman holds the gavel there. And in those settings, he can unnerve the most senior lawmaker just by sitting very quietly through an entire committee meeting before offering just a few choice words. When Lyman does speak, everybody listens because, again, he has this remarkable, almost uncanny ability to cut through the politics and just focus on what really matters. And that's Lyman. You aren't going to win a staring contest with him, but he can steer an entire negotiation with just a few carefully chosen words. As the longtime co-chair of the Senate Finance Committee, Senator Hoffman has become one of our state's most influential leaders. Through administrations and periods of economic uncertainty, he has earned bipartisan respect for his careful stewardship of public resources, deep institutional knowledge, and the ability to build practical consensus. And perhaps the accomplishment for which Senator Hoffman will be best remembered is Alaska's Power Cost Equalization Endowment. He worked actually alongside my father, Governor Frank Murkowski, and Lyman secured the long-term future of a program that helps make electricity more affordable in rural Alaska. Out in these regions, costs can be astonishingly high and can take up to half of a household's budget. But today, PCE is a major success. Its endowment exceeds over $1 billion, and it continues to serve families and schools and health clinics and businesses across rural Alaska. Lyman is a little bit predictable, and I say that because I could always count on Lyman Hoffman to ask me the hard questions. And I would give my annual address to the legislature, and Lyman would be sitting in the back of the of the chamber there, and he'd raise his hand and he'd say, "What are you doing to make energy cheaper?" Or, "What are you doing to help rural Alaskans?" And I always knew it was coming. I always knew it was coming because Lyman was consistent that way. He was practical and he was purposeful, and his clear focus, what are you doing to help rural Alaskans? What are you doing to help lower energy costs? That helped guide me here on my own in the Senate. Because what Senator Hoffman understands is that energy policy is not just kilowatts and price per barrel. It's about whether families can afford to heat their homes, whether elders can stay warm in the wintertime, and whether communities have the opportunity to grow. And again, this is where Lyman made his mark. As a leading advocate for Alaska's statewide weatherization program, he helped secure more than $600 million to make homes more efficient for Alaskans. And again, his work reflected a very simple belief that every Alaskan, no matter where you live, deserves a safe, warm home. From the days that we served in the state legislature to the present, Lyman Hoffman has represented not only his district, which covers Southwest Alaska and out into the Aleutians, but really he helped all rural Alaska with genuine distinction and giving them voice, giving them hope, and delivering real results. And just as important as those results is the example Lyman has set as a public servant. He has demonstrated that lasting public policy is built through collaboration rather than division. His influence extended far beyond the bills that he passed, shaping both the great state that he loves, the individuals who have served alongside him, and those that will follow him. And as I speak to Senator Hoffman's impressive legacy, I also want to acknowledge that no public servant achieves these things alone. Behind every legislative session, every late-night budget negotiation, and every year devoted to serving Alaska stood some key people. Certainly his staff over the years, but always, always Senator Hoffman's family. His wife Lillian was always there. His children Trina and Douglas. I know that the family made countless quiet, meaningful sacrifices to make all this work possible. So you too deserve to be recognized. Alaska is stronger because Senator Lyman Hoffman chose to dedicate his life to others, and his work will continue to benefit our state for generations to come. So congratulations, Lyman Hoffman, my friend Lyman, thank you. At some point, the special legislative sessions will end, and you will be able to conclude this incredible chapter of service to our state. And when that day arrives, and long into the future, Alaskans will remember you, we will celebrate you, and we will remain grateful for all that you have done. With that, Madam President, I thank you and I yield the floor. Wyoming for the opportunity to speak.
Madam President.
Senator from Wyoming.
Yeah, I thank the gentlelady from Alaska for visiting about a local legislator. They're tremendously important to all of us. Madam President, yesterday I addressed this chamber because we're wasting time we do not have to get the digital asset market structure bill passed, the bill called the Clarity Act. It is a strong bipartisan path forward that we have, and it's the best way for us to give digital assets, especially in this country, the certainty they need, and ensure the U.S. leads on digital asset innovation. The way to do it is through bipartisan support of this bill. And again, this is a very good bill, a bill created out of necessity, because the status quo does not work. My friend Senator Kirsten Gillibrand and I released the Lummis-Gillibrand Responsible Financial Innovation Act together in 2022 to give the U.S. industry the regulatory clarity it needs to thrive on U.S. soil, to give consumers the confidence they need to participate in our digital economy, and give law enforcement the tools they need to crack down on illicit finance and hold bad actors accountable. That 168-page bill would become the foundation for the Clarity Act. A year later, in 2023, we added 100 pages with stronger consumer protection provisions. Yet we got feedback from colleagues that they wanted more. So again, we listened. Today, this bill that was under 300 pages is more than 600 pages. That's hundreds of pages, built over 11 months of daily bipartisan negotiations in windowless rooms where colleagues from both parties shared their priorities, and we worked diligently to incorporate them. Title I alone has 33 separate Democrat-driven edits. We added 23 new sections on illicit finance at Democrats' request. Democrats secured another 30 wins in the CFTC portion of the bill, plus we created the 3 entirely new titles they wanted. And that's all before we even get to ethics, where the president bent over backwards to get my Democrat colleagues to a yes. We have 100 clear examples of compromise, and yet for some, this still isn't enough. Holding out for a perfect bill stopped being principled months ago. It has become an excuse not to legislate at all. And the people who pay for that excuse aren't in this room. They're the people we're about to talk about, the digital asset industry and the consumers who wish to participate with confidence in this digital economy, not to mention the future generations who will miss out because too many in this chamber said, not yet, I'm not ready. I've got an election in November, don't want to do it. The status quo in this industry doesn't work. It's not working for the digital asset industry or law enforcement or consumers. We have already watched exchanges collapse with no functioning bankruptcy framework built for this asset class. And we have already watched ordinary people stand in line for years waiting on bankruptcy courts to claw back pennies on the dollar of what they lost. When Celsius and Voyager went bankrupt, customer deposits didn't stay customer deposits. They became assets in a bankruptcy pool, fought over by creditors who had never even heard of the people who actually owned those assets. More than 4 million Americans lost access to their own money in 2022 because we don't have the protections the Clarity Act puts in place. And thousands of them are still sorting through bankruptcy claims today. That's what no regulation looks like. That's not a hypothetical or a talking point. That's real people suffering real losses, real years spent in bankruptcy court fighting for money that should never have been up for grabs in the first place. Customers will once again be put in a nasty fight with Wall Street law firms that they have no hope to win. If you believe in consumer protection, we must pass this bill to give consumers the protection in bankruptcy they deserve. Not passing this bill means everyone in this chamber will have to deservedly hang their heads the next time a crypto exchange collapses. Because there will be a next time, absent regulation. No one in this chamber gets to act surprised by that. It already happened. And if we don't get our acts together, it's going to happen again to our constituents under the exact same broken rules while we all sit here debating whether a bill with over 100 Democratic wins is still somehow not good enough. Another FTX is not a hypothetical we're guarding against. It's a guaranteed outcome of leaving this industry with no custody rules, no consumer protections, and no consequences when a platform fails people. And by the way, foreign adversaries aren't just waiting around for us to finish deliberating. They're moving money through the exact gaps this bill closes right now, today, while we hold out for something more perfect than what's already sitting on the table. To those who've already said they're a no vote, let me be clear. A no vote isn't a statement against President Trump because he's already given you what you asked for. It's a vote to keep American consumers inside a system we already know to be flawed on a theory that the fix wasn't good enough. It's a vote to drive American innovation, American jobs, and American oversight of this jurisdiction to Singapore or the UAE or whichever jurisdiction is happy to take what we're too foolish to accept. That's the actual choice that faces us, not Republicans versus Democrats. It's fixed or flawed. It's America leading or America sidelined. We've served up this win for you and set it in front of you. Over 100 wins in the base bill. An ethics agreement no other president in American history has volunteered, and by someone who didn't even have to give an inch, but did it because he believes that much in American innovation and what this asset class can bring for generations is worth protecting. Take it. Take it. Stop finding reasons not to. I know that if we fail here, this doesn't come back next year or the year after that. The realistic next change at market structure legislation is likely 2030 at the earliest. In the meantime, we'll lose businesses to other countries. We lose investment and jobs and tax revenue to jurisdictions moving faster than we are. We inhibit law enforcement's ability to hold bad actors accountable. And we lose our seat at the table to shape how this industry grows. At the exact same moment, we have the chance to guide it responsibly. We didn't get here by ceding the internet to Europe, and we cannot afford to cede digital assets the same way, especially now that we've already done the hard work, 5.5 years, putting this bill together. The window to lead right now is wide open. The end zone is inches away. But that window will not stay open for a body that continues to respond to opportunity with not yet. I've got an election. I don't want to take a stand. Opportunity waits for no one. Let's cinch up, let's punch the ball into the end zone and pass the Clarity Act now. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Ohio.
Thank you, Madam President. I am going to take us back 100 years to August 5th, 1926. It was in the midst of the Roaring Twenties. Calvin Coolidge was the president. Babe Ruth was ruling professional baseball. There was no television. Horses and cars shared the streets together. Life expectancy was 57 years, and the Great Depression was still off in the future. But on August 5th of 1926, a remarkable person was born, and I want to recognize him today. He's a World War II veteran, a loving husband, father, and grandfather. His name, Sergeant Wayne Phillips, Wayne Franklin Phillips, and he is approaching an extraordinary milestone, his 100th birthday. Pretty amazing. Today we honor him, rise today to honor him, to reflect on his service and sacrifice as part of a generation that secured the freedoms that we enjoy today. Now, I grew up in rural Northwest Ohio, nearly in the same neighborhood as Sergeant Wayne Franklin Phillips. And I'm always proud of the people of rural Northwest Ohio. And Sergeant Wayne Phillips is from Henry County. Henry County, where he was born and raised on a farm, became a farmer in an area, small town, outside a small town, Hamler, Ohio. And he is one of 3 brothers and 3 sisters, alongside his 3 brothers and 3 sisters. If you are ever in Hamler, Ohio, it's one of those places that is agricultural, the heart of agriculture in Ohio. You can see to the horizon in all 4 directions, and I know the presiding officer from Iowa understands what I mean by that. It's just farmland as far as you can see. And he graduated from Hamler High School at the age of 17, and he joined the Army's 81st Readiness Division just months after receiving his high school diploma. Of course he did. That's what a lot of people of his age did during that period of time. And during his military service, Sergeant Phillips was briefly involved in the Battle of Bulge. I think all of us who study our history know that that was one of the largest and bloodiest battles fought by the American forces in World War II, and really was the final battle to defeat Hitler's Nazis. Over the course of 41 days and hundreds of thousands of Allied troops, they fought to halt that Nazi offensive in Western Europe, and they were successful in winning the final battle that led to the end of World War II. His service took him to Germany, the Philippines, and Japan, and following Japan's surrender, Sergeant Phillips quickly rose through the ranks and earned the rank of Technician 4th grade, becoming the youngest man in charge of a motor pool servicing trucks and military equipment. As you might expect, farm boys from Ohio knew how to fix things. And Sergeant Wayne Phillips was one of those. Like so many members of the greatest generation, Sergeant Phillips helped defeat tyranny, liberate Europe, preserve freedom for future generations, and because of his service and sacrifice, the service and sacrifice of many Americans like him, our nation and much of the world has enjoyed liberty and peace and prosperity for most of his life since then. We owe an enduring debt of gratitude to our veterans and more than 400,000 Americans who made the ultimate sacrifice during World War II. And after being honorably discharged in 1946, Sergeant Phillips married his wife, Eileen, and together they raised 3 children, Wayne, Paul, and Martha. Today, he is also a proud grandfather, great-grandfather, as well as a devoted uncle. His commitment to service did not end when he returned home. When service is in your DNA, you serve your country, serve your family, you move home, you serve your community, and that's exactly what he did. As a respected civic leader in Henry County, he served 16 years as a Henry County Commissioner and 4 years on the Deschler Village Council. And even as he approaches here in just a few days, his 100th birthday, this may be the most amazing thing when I think about it. Sergeant Phillips, Wayne Phillips, continues to drive to work each day at age 100 to the Phillips Oil Company, the family business that he founded and continues to operate alongside and with many members of his family. Pretty amazing. He is also a devout man of faith, as an active member of the Deschler United Methodist Church, and also part of Deschler American Legion and the Maumee Valley Sportsman's Club. Sadly, the number of our surviving World War II veterans grows smaller each year. I've celebrated 100 birthdays of several of them. I always love to hear their stories. You know, you put yourself in a position, 17 years old, you just graduated from high school, and you decide you're going to go off and serve your country in a war. So many of that generation stepped up and did that, and that's why when we honor someone like Wayne Phillips, we honor him and many others. We should honor what we value, and I hope every time that any of us, and I give remarks about veterans and World War II and the sacrifices that many generations of Americans have made, that we honor that so that our children hear that service and sacrifice is valued. It is important. And so, Madam President, on August 5, Sergeant Wayne Franklin Phillips will celebrate his 100th birthday. It is an honor for me to share his story with my colleagues today, a life defined by service, family, faith, and community in support of our freedom. Sergeant Wayne Phillips is richly deserving of recognition as he reaches this remarkable milestone. I thank my colleagues for allowing me to honor this extraordinary Ohioan, and I extend my heartfelt congratulations to Sergeant Wayne Phillips on his 100th birthday. Congratulations, we celebrate you and your service. God bless you, and may God continue to bless America. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President,
Senator from New Jersey.
before I begin my formal remarks, I just want to stand here and give a formal apology to Jon Merlino. I have, for years, maligned him. I have disrespected, disregarded him. You know how I operate sometimes. And I just want to say he's a man of honor. I've taken him off my list, and now he's on the good list. So just for anyone who wants to know, the United States Senator, senior senator from New Jersey, has praised Jon Merlino, perhaps for his first time, because he's not a man that really generates a lot of praise usually. So I just want you to know, before I go into my formal remarks for the day, that Jon Merlino, you the man. Now I would like for the record to separate a little bit so I can start some of my formal remarks after I've tried to redeem the soul of a friend and colleague.
Without objection.
Thank you very much. Madam President, I really believe there's a reason why some of my Republican colleagues themselves have delayed the Blanche nomination, because this is actually no ordinary nomination. We haven't had a moment like this under Donald Trump where Republicans themselves have stopped the vote. Because this is not simply a vote about one man, it is a vote about whether the Department of Justice will remain independent of the President of the United States. The Attorney General of the United States of America has one client, not a political party, not a president, not a wealthy donor, not a political movement. The Attorney General's client is the Constitution of the United States and the American people. That is the sacred obligation of that office. When they're sworn in, they do not swear an oath to the president, to Donald Trump. They swear an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. Unfortunately, Todd Blanche has spent months in office demonstrating his allegiance not to our Constitution, but to the president. Time and time again, he has shown that he is only capable of serving the interests of one client, Donald Trump. And that is why this nomination should not simply be delayed, it should be rejected. The evidence is overwhelming. Congress came together in a bipartisan way to pass the Epstein Files Transparency Act because survivors deserved answers. They deserved justice. and the American people deserved transparency. Todd Blanche was responsible for carrying out that law. Instead, he delayed and delayed. He was stalling, and there was a release after the date and deadline prescribed by Congress that was so careless that sensitive information belonging to Epstein's survivors were exposed by the very department that was supposed to protect them. Their phone numbers, addresses, images, personal details. Think about that. The survivors entrusted the Department of Justice with some of the most painful chapters of their lives. They deserved care. They deserved competence. They deserved honesty. They deserved an adherence to the law. And instead, they received delays, excuses, and a terrible, tragic breach of their privacy. Then came the request of meeting with the survivors. For weeks, Mr. Blanche insisted he could not meet with them unless their attorneys were present. This was not true. A first-year law student knows that this is not true. His own department's policies and federal law make that clear. And when he finally did meet with them, the survivors, because a Republican senator demanded he do it, the survivors described the meeting as disappointing. They said they felt gaslit. They said they were skipped over. They said Mr. Blanche was condescending to the survivors of sexual assault. Even then, when the survivors pleaded for continued investigation into the Jeffrey Epstein co-conspirators, Mr. Blanche once again hid behind claims that the law prevented him from answering. So we simply have to ask the question, who is Jeffrey Epstein serving here? Is he serving the survivors? No. Is he serving the interests of the Department of Justice? No. Is he serving the American people? No. But we know that he rushed to the Situation Room for high-level members of the Trump administration to strategize on how to protect the president. It is another clear example that the person he is there to protect is Donald Trump. Last week, my Democratic colleagues held a spotlight forum to examine Mr. Blanche's record. We heard from a courageous Epstein survivor. We heard from ethics experts. We heard from one of Mr. Blanche's own former colleagues from the Southern District of New York. We heard from a former justice official appointed under a Republican president who served a Republican senator, Senator Hatch, here in this body, who was then fired simply because he had done his job on investigations involving Robert Mueller and Jack Smith. Different witnesses, different backgrounds, still one conclusion from every one of them, that Todd Blanche is unfit to lead the Department of Justice. And if there was any doubt, the events of recent days erase those doubts. Mr. Blanche, in his tenure, helped negotiate a corrupt, extraordinary settlement between Donald Trump's Department of Justice and Donald Trump. We've heard from the bench, the federal bench already, that there was no controversy. Donald Trump can't be on both sides of a negotiation. That corrupt structure was exploiting the judiciary to create an environment in which there would be a settlement. And out of that settlement, we saw unjust and untoward creation that outraged Americans all across the political spectrum. They created a slush fund. Think about what this means. The lawyer who represented Donald Trump now oversees the Department of Justice. And negotiations, an agreement between Donald Trump and Donald Trump that is not merely an appearance of conflict, that is the definition of a conflict. It's precisely why the Department of Justice must be independent. if you look at this slush fund agreement, within it there are immunity provisions that, according to that agreement, are to the former senior federal prosecutor. He said that this agreement and the immunity provisions are, quote, mind-boggling in scope. Donald Trump got a tax liability immunity that is extraordinary, mind-boggling in scope. This immunity provisions alone cover broad categories with no meaningful legal definition. When asked about those undefined terms during his confirmation hearing, Mr. Blanche effectively acknowledged that they could encompass almost anything. Anything. According to Blanche, negotiated a deal that gave Donald Trump immunity that could cover almost any kind of tax fraud that Donald Trump or his family committed. For Donald Trump, with his former lawyer at the head of the Justice Department, it seems like for the president, justice has no rules. Justice has no standards. Justice has no limits. When one man receives special rules unavailable to every other American, this is not justice, it is privilege. It is unjust privilege. During his confirmation hearing, Mr. Blanche repeatedly promised that he would act independently. But independence is not something you promise, it's something you demonstrate. He has been in this position for months and has had the chance to show us not promises, but actions. And at every important decision he's made, the same story comes out. Who was he serving? The Constitution or Donald Trump? The answer is unmistakable. This vote we have in the Senate on this nominee, every senator is going to have to eventually cast a vote. But history is going to record something much larger. It will record whether in this moment the United States Senate defended the independence of American justice, the independence of the Justice Department, or did we surrender it? Long after today's headlines are forgotten, long after today's politics have faded, one question will remain. When the independence of the Department of Justice was tested, where did we stand? I know where I stand. I stand for a Department of Justice whose only client is the American people. A department that follows the evidence, not politics. A department that defends the Constitution, not a president. No one, not even the President of the United States, is above the law. That principle has guided this great republic for nearly 250 years. It is our responsibility to preserve it today. It is the oath that we took, the commitment that we made, that we will serve the people and the ideals. To vote for Blanche is to surrender those ideals upon the altar of someone who wants to be a false god, where his interests are superior over everyone else's. That is wrong. History is watching. We should reject this nominee. Mr. President, I'd like to separate in the record this next set of remarks I'm going to give.
Without objection.
Thank you, sir. Mr. President, somewhere in America today, a father kissed his children goodbye before leaving to work. A mother boarded an airplane to attend her father's funeral. A husband drove to his construction job. A woman walked into an airport believing that they were following the law of our land. None of them expected to disappear into our immigration detention system. Yet this is happening all over our country. Over the last several months, immigration enforcement has accelerated dramatically. In June alone, ICE arrested more than 43,000 people, the highest monthly total in years. People are being arrested outside of their homes, at airports, at workplaces, near schools, near our churches, across communities throughout our nation, and many of them, most of them, are non-violent, with no criminal record. Many of them have lived here for years, many for decades. Many of them are raising American children. Some have American grandchildren, American spouses, and are an integral part of the community. Many of these folks are working jobs, paying taxes, following the legal process towards citizenship. A woman traveling home to Texas for her father's funeral was detained at an airport while she was pursuing her asylum claim. 2 other women were denied despite being married to American citizens and already in the legal process of obtaining permanent residency were detained. These are not people that are hiding from the law. These are people trying to follow it. Yet instead of helping them complete that process, our government took them, locked them away from their families, from the Americans that love them, the communities that cherish them, the businesses and jobs that sustain those families. Right now, today in America, roughly 70% of the people in immigration detention, often for-profit private companies, have never been convicted of a criminal offense. 70%. This is not what Donald Trump promised, that he would go after the worst of the worst. That is a dragnet. These, unfortunately, are indiscriminate arrests, not the result of focused law enforcement. They are the consequence of arbitrary arrest quotas and no guiding principles of decency and support of a legal immigration system. It is taking people who are seeking to abide by our laws and throwing them in prisons for the profits of private companies who also are big supporters and contributors to this president. When numbers become more important than justice, innocent people become collateral damage. And this doesn't just harm immigrants in our country or violate our values of decency, it harms all Americans. Too often this debate is framed as though immigrants are taking from our country, that they're takers. Well, the facts tell a different story. According to the conservative Cato Institute, far more than 2 decades of immigrants have contributed more in taxes, way more in taxes, than they've received in any kind of government benefit, many of which they're ineligible for. Together, immigrants have generated a fiscal surplus measured in the trillions of dollars. Undocumented immigrants alone paid nearly $100 billion in federal, state, and local taxes in a single year. They work, they build, they start businesses, they strengthen our economy, they contribute to Social Security and Medicare. They help build prosperity for all of America. Yet this administration wants to punish many of the very people that are helping to strengthen it, violating the commitment to go after the dangerous people, to focus our taxpayer resources on getting criminals off of our street. But no, they're using our taxpayer money to go after people that have been in our country for years and decades, who are contributing it and are working hard to abide by our immigration laws. Nowhere is this contradiction more painful than what we're seeing right now with Haitian immigrants in our country. Earlier this year, the United Nations described Haiti as one of the most complex crises in recent history. Armed gangs control large sections of the country. Kidnappings are widespread. Sexual violence is used as a weapon. Thousands upon thousands have been killed. Natural disasters continue to deepen an already catastrophic humanitarian crisis. Trump's own State Department gives Haiti its highest travel warning, level 4. In other words, do not travel to Haiti. Think about that. We tell American citizens it is far too dangerous for you to go to Haiti. Then we tell Haitian families, we're sending you there. How can both be possibly true? How could a nation of decency take people with temporary protective status and send them to the very country our nation warns us not to go to because of the violence and destitution? Have we no decency in our policies? If a country is far to visit for an American to step foot into, how can it be safe enough for families that are now being forced to go back there? Temporary protected status exists for precisely this kind of moment. Congress created it. A Republican president signed it into law. It recognizes a simple yet profound moral truth. When extraordinary danger exists, Americans should not force human beings into it. The values of our country, the values of our collective faiths, the values of the best of humanity are being violated here. We are a moral nation, but forcing people here on temporary protective status back into countries where there's such violence and destitution violates our morals, our values. It cheapens us all. It is wrong. Yet this administration has canceled temporary protective status for more than 330,000 Haitians. Many have lived here for years and years. Many of them already have had American children in our country. Many of them have married Americans themselves. They've worked here. They've paid billions in taxes here. They built businesses here, served communities in some of the most humble jobs in our hospitals as assistants, helping the ill and the elderly. There are thousands that I've come to know are in New Jersey, many who I know personally. They are woven into the fabric of our communities, but now, from a callous president, they face deportation into one of the most dangerous places on earth. I ask my colleagues, can we look these families in the eye and honestly say, this reflects the best of who we are? This reflects the values of our faiths? Most of us here in this body are Christians. Would Jesus send someone from our nation into danger, rip them away from their communities? Is that what our faiths dictate? Is that what our ideals dictate? Even some Republicans have been raising alarms. Members of the House voted to extend protections. The Republican governor of Ohio called these deportations, quote, a mistake. Because this is not simply an immigration debate, it is a moral test. America has always been strongest when our laws reflected both security and humanity. These are not conflicting ideals. In fact, they're interwoven. When we violate our humanity, we violate our security. We can secure our borders, and we should. We can enforce our laws, and we must. But we can also distinguish between those who threaten America and those who have spent years here in our country strengthening it. This is not weakness. The Haitians in our community, keeping them here amidst the crisis in Haiti, it's not weakness, it's wisdom. It is justice. It is morally right. It's long past time that we in Congress modernize an immigration system that virtually everyone agrees is broken. I can't tell you the conversations I've had with Republican colleagues of mine. The late Lindsey Graham is a great example about how our immigration laws are so broken, it makes it hard for anyone who wants to follow the rules to be able to, in any timely way, become a citizen of our country. The Cato administration calls it more likely to win the lottery than it is to come in our country. This is one of the reasons why our population is declining. We need laws that reflect our values, laws that are orderly, laws that keep us safe and secure, laws that protect the border, laws that affirm our values. We can have all of that. Do not listen to the false choice of a president who wants to send people back to a human version of hell, rip people from our communities, all in the name of safety and security. That is a lie. We must create laws that offer a realistic pathway for people who have lived, worked, contributed, paid taxes, invested their lives in this country for decades, especially those with American families and American children. The question before us is so much larger than immigration. It's about who we are becoming as a society when we turn our back about our neighbors being thrown in private detention facilities that are profiting off of their pain, who we are as a nation when we want to rip people away from their families and their children and send them to modern day's hell, who we are as a nation when we take those people that are good enough to work in our hospitals, to take care of our elderly, but then we want to turn our back on them and let them be dragged out of our country even though they've been here for years, followed our laws, and are working towards a pathway of citizenship. Who are we if we continue down this road that creates false fears, that spreads lies about immigrants, that turns its very back on the fundamental precept to love your neighbor? Well, I still believe in America. I still believe we are strong enough to create safety and security and to embrace those who love our nation and serve her faithfully even though they're not citizens. I still believe in America that is big enough and bold enough to protect its borders and love the stranger. I still believe in a nation that's immigration laws can affirm our dignity and decency and not be an assault on it. I still believe in a nation that honors its faith traditions and knows that we have to love our neighbor and welcome the stranger, especially when they're fleeing persecution and hate and violence. I believe in the highest ideals of our nation. That's why we have laws like temporary protected status in the first place. It reflected the best of us. But I fear this administration is showing the worst of who we are. I honor Republican think tanks, the Republican governors who all have the courage to stand up and say this is wrong. We need that kind of chorus of conviction here in the United States Senate. I ask my colleagues to not let this president so violate our collective values. This is not a right or left issue. It is a right or wrong issue. I pray for our nation. I pray that we live our ideals and don't just talk about them. I pray that we teach our children who we are, not by what we say, but by what we do. I pray that in this crisis, we do not allow a president to undermine decency and grace and send innocent people back to environments where they will face nightmares and violence. We can be the America we say we are, but this chamber must stand up. Mr. President, thank you. I yield the floor.